This talk is part of the UCD Citizen Science Community of Practice, which was established by my wonderful colleagues here, Jane Nolan from UCD Library and Liz Bruton from UCD Earth Institute. And it's been a wonderful initiative for really engaging people on citizen science. Today's talk will tell the story of what Creating Our Future achieved and how researchers and policymakers can use the findings in their work. In the autumn of 2021, the people of Ireland were invited to consider how research can contribute to the creation of a better future for themselves and their communities. This work was led by Science Foundation Ireland on behalf of the Government of Ireland, and I was delighted to play a very small part as a member of the National Advisory Forum. So I can tell you from first-hand experience what an amazing undertaking it was. So it's just to me now to introduce our speakers. Ciara Cotter is Public Affairs and Change Manager at Science Foundation Ireland. Her role at the agency involves managing relationships with key stakeholders, such as other government bodies across the political system and the research community. Previous roles at SFI have included for her working in areas such as international relations, industry engagement, and corporate governance. And Ciara was assigned to lead Creating Our Future in January 2021. Ali Boyle works at SFI, and she is responsible for a range of programs, including National Science Week in November and education programs to help researchers build confidence in inquiry-based learning. Ali is also a senior research associate. I was really thrilled to hear this, Ali, at the Science Museum in London, a fabulous institution, where she spent 20 years as a curator, and she's also a member of the UKRI's STFC advisory panel for public engagement. So I'm really delighted to hand over now to Ciara to tell us about Creating Our Future.
Thank you, Sandra. And I'm delighted to be here, and I know Ali is too. And I will tell you from first-hand experience that Sandra played more than a very small part in creating our future, a really wonderful and valuable partner that helped to inform the direction and the design of the campaign. So what I'll cover over the next, I'd say about 20 minutes or so is, to tell you the story about creating our future, what we did, why we did it, how we did it. And I suppose there's a little bit of a call to action at the end of this, I suppose, for the research community. It's what happens next after creating our future. So what was it? What is it about? And it really was a dialogue with the public to find out what is important to the people of Ireland and the role that they believe that research can play in addressing their challenges and harnessing their opportunities that they see in their communities and in Ireland. And we wanted to gather ideas from lived experiences. This really was very much part of our North Star, that ideas can come from anywhere. Anybody can have a good idea. And we wanted particularly to hear from those that can be typically hard to reach. We wanted to remove all barriers and make it as accessible as possible campaign. From the outset, it was really important for us that this did not feel like a survey. It wasn't a survey. It was about a conversation, about going to the public where they were at, and very often bringing researchers with us and sitting down together to talk about the challenges and the opportunities in their communities and the research that's happening, as well as adjacent to those challenges and opportunities. So very much a conversation. Just to see if I can pull down notes here without messing up the slides. Yes, an important point which Sandra touched upon. What we wanted to do this for quite a while at SFI. It's part of our strategy. It all came about around the time that the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science was established. That's our parent department. And we brought this idea to the minister, and he thought it was such a fantastic idea. He said, that's great, but it's going to be an all of government initiative. I want to lead it, and we want the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach, everybody involved. But you guys are going to do all the work, but we'll lead it. But no, it was very much a partnership with the department. But that was a crucial piece for us, actually, because ensuring that you have all government departments signed up as such means that you get buy-in from the full system. It went to Cabinet, It secured its own dedicated budget from Cabinet as well. And as we went through the journey, that really did prove to be a crucial decision for us, the campaign. So I'm going to skip through the animation here. I suppose why this initiative, for those of you that are in the room, I'd say it's probably an obvious why, but remember it was launched in 2021, so we were still within COVID, in the pandemic, and at that time we all know that the importance of research in our lives became so evident. So we wanted to harness that and to keep that momentum going. There's just a general increase in public interest in being heard, particularly younger generations in the area of climate, for example. We've seen success in Ireland around citizens' assemblies and success in other countries. We lean very much on our colleagues in the Netherlands and the Flanders region in Belgium. They had done something similar before, so we learned from their experiences, and we had many conversations with them, what works, what doesn't work. But then we took it in the Irish context and molded something unique for Ireland. We know in this room, better innovation. It comes about with with public engagement and user engagement. And then the final point there, which I personally think is a very important point, much of the research agenda in Ireland is funded through the Exchequer, through taxpayers' money, and isn't it only right and that the public should have an opportunity to input into what's important to them and the role that research can play in their lives. So that's I suppose the why, and then the what. And we spent as a collective team, and SFI and other agencies and other stakeholders, including Sandra, in the system, what are we actually going to go to the public? And so a huge amount of time thinking about this, because our North Star was to have an inclusive and accessible campaign to elicit really great ideas. We needed to remove as many barriers as possible. We had variations of the question that led us to worry that it would put pressure on the public to come up with a solution. We didn't want that intent there. We needed them to tell us what was important, but to leave the space to come up with a solution. We wanted to leave the space for those blue skies thinking, questions just for curiosity's sake. And we also were very careful to have to not use the word science actually in the campaign. It was about research. It was all types of research, AHSS and STEM. So this is what we came up with. Tell us your idea for what researchers in Ireland should explore to create a better future. But the question was asked in the context and in the rooms of research and what research it can do. So it was set in a certain context. So just what we did, we went all around the country, visited every county at least once, sometimes 2 or 3 times. We launched an advertising and PR campaign. The first launch was with the Taoiseach and Minister Harris. We had TV, radio, press, all of that good stuff. We hit the road. We had our Creating Our Future coffee truck. It came to the UCD campus. That was a big hit. The free coffee. We had thematic events as well. So we had ambassadors for the campaign. So Luke O'Neill, for example, was one. Shane O'Donnell was another, a GAA personality. And we created events around Shane. We had an event on concussion and a nice fireside chat with him about the impact on concussion on his life. So just trying to reach into all different the cohorts of the population with things that might be interesting to them. We had stakeholder events. To that point, we wanted to go to where the public were. So a nice example of that is the NCBI. So my mother-in-law is in your site, so she goes to this NCBI group every second week in Drumcondra. So I said, right, we're going to go there. I'm going to bring some researchers that are working in that area. They're going to tell the researcher the problems that they're living with. And they had a really nice discussion about research and the challenges, the real life challenges that they face. So we did lots of different things like that. And we also, because we were in the pandemic, we were still very much online and hybrid environment. We got as much in person as we could, as was safe to do so. But we also introduced online brainstorms. So if there was a conference going on that we knew was happening, we would pick up the phone and say, look, this really important Government of Ireland campaign is happening. Will you give us 20 minutes on your agenda? And we had a template for a brainstorm with that audience using Menti, which is a great platform, if any of you have ever used it. And we got hundreds and thousands, Ciara, hundreds and thousands of submissions through that platform as well. So that's just to reflect, we got voices from all over Ireland, like I said. We went to every county at least once or twice. And I was saying to Sandra earlier on, I'd say that we counted a certain number of events. I can't remember, it's like 800 or something off the top of my head. But I would say there's a lot more that actually happened. As I meet people now in person, they say, "Oh, that was great, Jen. We did this and this in our office." That's not on my list. It's not on my radar. So, but which is a good thing. You know, it flew and it grew its own legs. I just want to put in this slide because we had an advisory forum, and you can see the very small writing, but they're broken up into pillars. The research partners pillars, so they would be like the actors really within the research ecosystem in Ireland, like funders and things like that. Government departments pillar, again, to that first point, really important that there was full government buy-in, and societal partners pillars, which is where Sandra, I think was it, you were in that pillar. And the reason we set up this slightly complex governance structure was because we really wanted to ensure that we reached all communities. There is no way that SFI or the department on our own could reach the blend of stakeholders that we needed. So really the true success of the campaign, and I'll talk about the number of submissions we got in a minute, is due to the blend of that stakeholder group. We brought our project managers on board with us to work with us on the project. They saw my vision and they thought I was absolutely bananas. There's no way we're going to be able to manage this. But they had humble pie in the end, and they said that was absolutely the right thing to do. And we had a subcommittee as well that Sandra sat on that helped us to distill some of the things that we were hearing at the advisory forum meetings to help inform the design of the campaign itself. So a really important aspect of the design of the campaign. So then on to the submissions themselves. We had a target of 10,560 submissions, and that was based on the fact that the Flanders region in Belgium got 10,559. So obviously we wanted to beat them. And the Netherlands, 11,700. And Germany, who have done this since us, have received 14,439. So we are still top of the leaderboard. We received 18,062 submissions. And I do believe they are submissions that were, it's not just, there was a lot of single word submissions, a lot of short submissions, but they were very much in the context of a conversation. So a lot of really valuable context there. And we had set, limitations around 420 characters permitted. Again, we wanted to remove kind of as much barriers as possible, make it as straightforward as possible. And we collected some amount of data. And I suppose when I talk to people who are thinking about going on this journey, there is such a temptation to gather as much information as you can. And we resisted it. It was hard, but we did resist it. And only things like range, age range, and location and county were optional. Again, we just want to remove any barriers to people actually giving us their ideas. So once we had all the submissions, and actually before we received all the submissions, we had established an expert committee made up, and I suppose this is really where the academic community really stepped up for us. We had our expert committee led by Linda Hogan, who's in Trinity, a strong representation of UCD again, David Farrell here, as well as Barry Smith as our data analytics team lead. But sitting behind the expert committee, these were leading a number of expert committee groups of over 70 experts from all walks of life, analysing, first developing the analysis methodology for the submissions, and then looking at every single submission as a view to grouping them into various clusters. So they were very much, I suppose, we saw it as when we received the submissions, we handed over the baton. They were the custodians then of the voice of the public, and it was their role, and they took this role very seriously to reflect the public's voice with no bias introduced. Methodologies were developed to ensure that there was no bias introduced, and it truly was a reflection of the voice of the public that came through in the report. So from the findings, from those 18,000, more than 18,000 submissions, they had a very difficult task, and they did a phenomenal job of clustering those into into 16 themes. And I suppose this is just one way of clustering the ideas to facilitate presentation and the findings. But when you read the expert committee report, where you'll find the detail that sits underneath these themes, what strikes me is you can look at titles here, but it's really when you look at the detail, you can see how things are so entangled. I was on the streets of Ireland a lot, listening to the people of Ireland, and things that came up, I might have expected to see them, let's say, in embedding climate action, but they came up somewhere different around valuing and connecting communities, because there are things like creating green spaces, but really the essence of the idea or the challenge was about a place to connect communities. So it's all entangled, and it really is worth just looking at the detail that sits behind the report. I just wanted to put this in to help people to understand how to navigate how the expert committee report is structured, I suppose. Each theme has a commentary and a calls to action. It's been written by the expert committee, and it's been peppered in along with by some submissions from the public. And then this is just another example on the benefits of fundamental research. There's some public insights there. There was a design thinking group as well that brought wonderful visuals to the report as well, and just a different perspective. All the submissions were looked at from about 3 different lenses. So what happened then? As I said, this is a Government of Ireland campaign. It was approved at Cabinet. So the reports went back to Cabinet. We went back to the Cabinet and said what the public had to say. And from there, creating our future, and the voice of the public is represented quite strongly across national strategies, and particularly Impact 2030, the National Research and Innovation Strategy. It feeds into things like challenge funding. We're seeing some proposals coming through with reference on our National Challenge Fund, referencing creating our future findings. And the ideas from the public, they are very much a book of inspiration. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But also the continued dialogue with the public on research and database, and a database for exploration is important. So since the campaign, we've tried to keep the conversation going with the public, going to the places where the public are. So for example, we were at the ploughing championship. We were, myself and Annie were at the ploughing with our screens with the findings. We went to the young scientists. People where people gather. We try and bring the findings. We also, what is very important to us is going back to Leinster House, going back to our policy makers and our politicians with the findings, and we've brought the findings to a number of Oireachtas committees. So the Committee on Autism and the Irish Language, for example. And one particularly nice moment for me actually in the Committee on Autism was a researcher. We bring researchers with us. We don't just go talk about the campaign. We bring researchers that are working in areas that are relevant to what people have said is important to them. And a particularly nice moment at the Committee on Autism was with a researcher there, Lorna Lopez from Maynooth, talking about her work in the area of genetics in the autism space, and reading out a submission from a parent of 2 children with autism and saying, I lie awake wondering at night, did I do something wrong? So it's quite a powerful moment, that researcher reading out the submission to a policymaker and talking about her research. So those are the kind of things that we've been doing to try and keep it alive. And I suppose then it comes to the research community call to action. So just to make things a little bit more complicated, there are 2 reports that come out of creating our future. You have the expert committee report, which contains, I suppose, the voice of the public. This is the analysis of the submissions. And then there's the campaign report, and the campaign report will tell you the story of creating our future, but importantly, it contains a set of recommendations, and those recommendations are there to try and facilitate something happening, you know, in government, in the research community. So within that report, I pulled out these 2 recommendations that are particularly relevant for this audience. So researchers from all backgrounds, as well as policymakers, are invited to review the report and interrogate the database for the benefit of their domain or specific expertise, and it should be used as a new and complementary source of ideas for research. It's a source of inspiration as opposed to prescription. And also the higher education research sector introduces a mechanism to promote creating our future database, so it's available to those who wish to interrogate it as part of the process to define research projects or masters and PhDs. And I just reference a really nice example of that second recommendation. Action is again from Maynooth, funnily enough, the Department of Design and Innovation there used the Creating Our Future findings as the design brief for their fourth year undergrad students for the final year project. So the students were tasked with developing products that responded to the needs of the public as documented in the Creating Our Future project. So that was really lovely to go to the launch of that and see that. It was I suppose a seed. It sparked an idea for them and they brought it forward from there. So yeah, I would say the expert committee report is a really great source of the ideas to look at that and look at the analysis, but also the online database, which I might have a little play with if we've time to show you how to use that and how you can explore the ideas. But also all of the submissions are there. The raw data is there for others to analyze in whatever way that you want. We've made that public for everybody to see. Obviously, there's no personal information there because we didn't gather that in the first place, really. So yeah, I suppose they're the calls to action. To have a look, have a poke around at it. It might spark some ideas for you. I think that's my last. Yep, I'm going to hand over to Ali there.
Thanks, Ciara. I'll just terrible with those clickers. So I will preface this by saying I started at SFI after all of this work had been done, so I can take no credit for any of this and all of the time my colleagues spent out on the road in coffee trucks and everything else. But just to talk through some perspectives of what it means in terms of the education and public engagement work that SFI supports. I mean, I think one of the interesting, it's almost buried in the expert committee report, but it is that really interesting phrase of, you know, what the public interpreted that question as when they were asked it. And it wasn't really about what research do you want people to do. It was, what is bothering you? What are your concerns? What do you care about? Now, some of that will be, of course, if people are coming out and there's government logos everywhere, it's also a good chance for everyone to go, right, well, this is what's annoying me today. But I think it's a really important message for us to say, you know, it is genuinely grounded in people's everyday real life concerns. And that's the way to interpret it, as research being not something separate from that, and research is something that is, and there was a huge range of concerns and issues and interests raised in those, as Ciara has said, from the range of submissions. So one of the things that came out very strongly in terms of a real life concern was the education system. And obviously everyone's through all ages has had some sort of experience of that, but it came out very strongly as we need to fundamentally reimagine how the education system in this country works. We need to educate people for life, not just for passing the Leaving Cert. Really important to promote thinking and critical thinking, logical thinking, creativity and ethics, rather than rote learning facts. Strong messaging about grounding in community and place and grounding in real world life skills. So that again was something, you know, just to kind of hear that coming across. There is work happening in that already. And again, you know, we're not trying to claim that Creating Our Future is the seed for every single activity that's happening, but it meshes very well with plans that have been in place for some time and are starting to happen around reform of different kinds of systems in this country. For example, the new primary maths curriculum has just been launched, and that is actually a co-created project. So that was involving teachers and learners and parents in the co-creation of what that project will look like. There's Department of Education has a regular program to upskill teachers, and SFI contributes. That's a bit grainy, but SFI contributes to that as well through one of our primary skill programs. And interestingly, implanting findings from research into education planning. And again, this is so there is work happening, but changing the education system is slow. Curriculum change takes a really, really long time. So what can we be looking at now in terms of how we can support that and how we can support educators at all levels? And one of the things with that is, you know, rather than just looking at formal education systems, what can we look at with public engagement opportunities? And again, one of the themes that came out, and this was very much a cross-cutting theme of the 16 themes, was strengthening the research landscape and strengthening public engagement being a really important part of strengthening the overall research landscape. And ensuring that the public is genuinely involved in the research landscape. So some of that was around improving communication about research, but very much around the role of research in society and how the research system works and how the research process works, not just the outputs of research or what has been learned. Improving access to the outcomes of research, so looking at more open access and more open access for everyone. And crucially, empowering communities to carry out research for themselves and incentivizing different communities to co-create research and be involved in that research process. So I think quite a few of you will be familiar with this. This is the public engagement onion, first developed by our friends at the Wellcome Trust, which has now had so many things squashed into it that it is now the public engagement avocado. So again, this would be something SFI supports public engagement in all kind of different aspects of this onion. From the outside of the onion, it's more information sharing. As you move further in, we're looking at different levels of dialogue and how much more dialogue there might be between members of the public and researchers or specialists. And, you know, up for argument about where things sit on this as well. So, for example, things like new teaching materials and methods. So I talked about curriculum there, but also from talking to people, teachers at Young Scientist, it's not just third level researchers who might be using Creating Our Future to design projects. So teachers were really interested in that report and taking it with them to go, this is great, I can use this to help get my students interested in what projects are we going to do, what's a big issue in our town, how will we design projects around that to do in our classroom. Then obviously different levels of citizen science, whether that might be a project that is more researcher led as to the research question and involving the public in collecting data, or citizen science where the public are more involved in the collaboration of the delivery of the research itself, or, you know, very much shared decision making around the design of the research question in the first place. And as I said, they are all things SFI supports in different ways. We are looking at how we can move more and more towards the center of that onion. And particularly at the moment, engage research, particularly around the National Challenges Fund is where we're seeing a lot of that happening, but it's something we'd like to do across various of the different funding streams that SFI supports. And the other one, which this may be music to everyone's ears. We said we'd do it in a strategy document, so we're going to have to do it, aren't we? So we have made a commitment to grow citizen science across SFI funded programs. One way we will look at that, so I have said that we do look at this across some of the funding that we already do, but we are going to look at scoping a scheme that is dedicated to funding citizen science. So we will need to think a little bit about how that relates to existing funding streams that we do have and different flavors of citizen science or different flavors of participatory research. And I'm conscious actually that even what we mean by citizen science is very much shifting, and the words we even use for that are shifting as well. Really things we really need to consider, and we know, and we've learned a lot from work that you guys have done as well, in terms of what are the infrastructures and supports that would be needed in a funding scheme to do that? You know, for example, pilots, for example, ensuring there is enough community support. This is also something that, as some of you will be aware, SFI and the Irish Research Council will be amalgamating. So it'll be something that we, you know, again, it means that when we say citizen science, it is very much in the broadest sense of participatory research of all flavors. So my colleague Colette Curran, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, and I will hopefully be back next year if we are invited to talk to you a bit more about that and to actually do some consultation with you. So walking the walk with Creating Our Future, consulting with the people who are actually most involved in doing this. So we'll be back to hear from you about what you would want from an agency in terms of support for the work that you do.